Hello, I will be presenting my diabetes registry database. Um, I like to use the model form because it clearly shows the connection of all the tables and it just shows everything you need to see about the database. Um, in general, I made 5 tables for this database. Um, I made a main table which has patient demographics. Then the other 4 tables connect to the patient demographics table, and I just wanted to make sure everything, the important tests and everything is organized clearly, and so in order for the end user being able to retrieve the information easily. Um, I had a table with all the glucose monitoring test results, which is definitely needed, which is needed for a patient with diabetes. They run so many tests, and a database is needed to organize all this data. Also, the patient diagnosis, because there are different diagnoses for diabetes. And then connected to those 2 tables, I did glucose monitoring test types and diagnosis types, which um, which is also important because if the end user wants to look up information specifically on test types relating to the test results, or the test types relating to patient diagnosis, or the patient diagnosis types relating to the test results, they can easily retrieve all of this information with the way I set up the tables. Um, Now we'll just go into each table and what each table includes. The patient demographics table is basically speaks for itself. It's just the patient name, patient ID, their address, gender, date of birth, and provider ID. The glucose monitoring test results includes I included in this database. I included uh yeah, the test results. I included 2 test results, the glucose results and the glucose timing. No, I included the glucose monitoring test results includes the test ID, test results, and glucose timing. This will then connect to the glucose test types. Because if I made one huge table that included the test type and the test results for each patient, it wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't work. So I had to separate the the test types from the patient test results to make a more organized table that would be easily retrievable by the end user, and they won't have any issues looking up the information. Now the test types table includes the test ID and also the test description, which I will show exactly what those are in the next section. Then patient diagnosis table includes patient ID, the diagnosis ID, and the year they were diagnosed, which is very important for monitoring reasons. The Either the physician or the healthcare provider um, can know how long the patient has the disease and interpret what kind of treatments are needed. And then the diagnosis type includes the diagnosis ID and the diagnosis description. So all of these tables, they're all connected to each other based on the either the test ID, the uh, patient ID and test ID, then patient ID, diagnosis ID, and because of this, all of the data will be easily organized and easily retrievable by the healthcare provider or whichever end user needs the information for research purposes or what have you. Okay, so now we will go over here. I'm going to the registry tables. Now here, the diagnosis types. These are all the diagnosis types: type 1, type 2, um, diabetic retinopathy, hypertension, and prediabetes. These are all diagnoses that they're all related to having diabetes. Oh, yeah, along with having diabetes. Then the other table. This has the test results. All the test results are here, and this includes the patient ID, the test ID, and all the test results. And these are all the test types, which includes a test ID in the test results section. So it has a test ID, the hemoglobin A1C, and the plasma glucose, which are tests that are ran constantly on diabetic patients. Okay, and the patient demographics here, it has all the patient information, patient name, the patient ID, and gender. And here, this has a patient ID and diagnosis ID. And this relates to the diagnosis types here, with the diagnosis ID. Okay. So this registry, I feel, is very straightforward, and it's very organized, and the end users shouldn't have any issues retrieving any information they need um, to compare and contrast, or for clinicians to create treatments for the patients based on their test results and how long they've had the disease. And also they can also look at maybe the area they live. They can mix and match, like the city they're from. Maybe that affects their how well they're maintaining their diabetes and everything like that. Okay, so to the second part of this, I created users. I have this all organized. Okay. Let me do this. Okay, so I created 4 users that has all of the privileges that you asked for. Um, Amanda is the database administrator. John is the well, I saw that there was an option for database designer, which is basically what it is. He does the yes, he's a database designer. Create, he can update the data, create tables, everything like that, but he can't delete. Susan Susan can only see the views table, which I created before here. Susan can only have access to the views. And Jake can do the backup. So here I did all of the statements here to grant access for each of the users. For Amanda, grant all. For John, he can update and everything except delete. For Jake, he's granted access to the database, but he can only back up. So he's granted access, but he can't do anything else. And Susan she can only see the views that were created. So here, this here will show the grants the access that each user has. So Amanda is granted privileges on everything on the diabetes registry, and John, he can update all the data, but he cannot delete anything. Jake, he can see all the data and he can back up the data, but he can't update or anything like that, or create views or anything. And Susan, she can only see the views. Okay, well, that concludes my presentation of my database. Thank you.